Most people know Thay as an evil country, ruled by powerful wizards who obey a tyrannical lich. You've probably encountered a red wizard in a campaign you've played in, or maybe seen them as villains in various video games, novels, and even the new movie. But what about everyone else? The red wizards are the smallest minority in the country. What is everyone else like? What is living in Thay like? Most people in Thay aren't evil wizards. They're just people trying to live their lives. Today, I hope to shed light on this country outside of the evil red wizards. However, if you do want to know as much as possible about the red wizards, then check out my previous video on them. I get in depth on their hierarchy training and how their government structure works. First, let's discuss the races of Thay. Thay is a predominantly human country, and there are two main human ethnic groups that reside there. The first are the Mulan. The Mulan are the ones with Mulhorandi blood in them. Mulhorand being the empire that controlled Thay until the Red Wizards seceded. The Mulani have maintained the power that they wrested from their distant masters. The Mulani tend to be of a higher class than the rest of Thayan citizens. Most Red Wizards and nobles are Mulan. Most bureaucrats and other upper-class positions, such as Tharshians and Tharshianesses, are Mulan. Leaders within the military, government offices, and clergies are usually drawn from the ranks of nobles, which are usually of Mulan descent. Thanks to this upbringing, many Mulani tend to be racist, especially toward non-humans. Mulani are typically tall and thin, with brown or hazel eyes, deep yellow to brown to sometimes slate gray skin. They have a little bit of brown or black body hair, but they generally are expected to keep that closely shaved. The other main human group are the Rashami. The Rashami are the common folk of Thay, kin to the folk of Rashaman. Most of Thay's citizens, the shopkeepers, skilled laborers, and overseers of most slave work teams, are Rashami. One thing to keep in mind, even though the Rashami don't have the same advancements available to them as the Mulani do, and most of the people above them, nobles, red wizards, government officials, etc., are Mulani, they don't resent them or feel oppressed. They're not happy about their Mulani overlords, but they are resigned to their lot and they take pride in their powerful country, seeing themselves as Thayans first. Quote, "They see themselves as the true heart and core of Thay's greatness, carrying the realm upon their backs and doing the work that is truly necessary. For the Mulani lack the skills to properly feed themselves, build or make anything, or really function. All they know is how to decide and lead and boss others around, and so they are nothing without us to do the real work for them. This engenders not so much resentment of Mulani as a deep pride that we the workers are pulling Thay forward and ever upward to brighter greatness." End quote. Rashami are a hardy people, short, stocky, and muscular. They have dusky skin and dark eyes. They tend to be very hairy with thick black hair. However, the Rashami of Thay shave their heads to emulate the Mulani Thayans. Any Rashami of sufficient means own slaves, at least as of the 1300s DR. The most common non-human humanoids in Thay are gnolls and orcs. They form the backbones of the Thayan armies. Gnolls are usually placed in city garrisons, tax stations, border checkpoints, and other places where they are likely to encounter many civilians. The less controllable orcs are usually used as shock troopers. If Thay isn't currently at war, the orcs end up sitting idle for long periods of time, itching for combat. If they don't get the violence they want, they riot among themselves. To keep this at bay, the Red Wizards set up a regular series of gladiatorial games where orcs, gnolls, and other violent humanoids fight in blood matches for the enjoyment of a crowd. Goblins and halflings aren't uncommon, but they are almost always slaves. Obviously, you can find almost anyone anywhere in the Forgotten Realms, but those are the races that are documented as being relatively common. As far as what the views of non-humans in Thay are, I found this, quote, "Many Mulani view elves and halflings as equivalent to children, while gnomes and dwarves are often despised or driven away under pain of death. Other races like orcs, half-orcs, and centaurs are tolerated so long as the Mulani believe that they can be employed as useful, strong-backed individuals." End quote. Classes of Thay. At the top of the Thayan social hierarchy are the Red Wizards. As of the 1400s DR, the very tippy top is High Regent Zaz Tam. Beneath him is the Council of Zulkirs. Then the rest of the Red Wizards according to their hierarchy, with the spies and enforcers of the Zolkirs trickling down to the rank and file wizards and then ending with their apprentices and novices. If you want to know more about this ordering and how Red Wizards work, check out my most recent video. Beneath the Red Wizards are the nobles. Most of Thay is owned by noble families of Mulan descent. They make money by leasing these to farmers, ranchers, miners, etc. Technically, anyone can own land, but since most of it is already owned by nobles, it is difficult for a commoner to acquire land of their own. The nobles also make up the majority of Tharshians, bureaucrats, sages, priests, and the richest merchant families. Beneath the nobles are the military commanders and veteran soldiers who may or may not be Mulani nobles. Then come the middle class. The engineers, the owners of forges, construction materials, and warehouses, and the best artisans and craftsmen. Beneath them are the most successful shopkeepers, many of them owning chains. This middle class is composed of Mulani, Rashami, and mixed lineage humans. Then comes the lower class, the semi-skilled workers and common laborers, bodyguards, shop and warehouse guards, loaders and drovers, farmers, etc. These can be of any Thayan-tolerated race. Most are not citizens. At the bottom of Thayan society are the many slaves. Slaves can earn the trust of their masters and work with light or no supervision, but they are never freed. In fact, it is illegal to free slaves in Thay. They are always owned by someone, and if their master dies, they are inherited or seized by a creditor. Slaves are property and nothing else. Most slaves are captured from neighboring Aglarond and Rashomon. Humans from dozens of other nations can also wind up here, along with dwarves, halflings, goblins, gnomes, orcs, gnolls, and other non-humans. Elves are the most prized slaves in Thay, but they are rare and tend to prefer dying than submitting to captivity. Drow are the rarest slave race and seem to take slavery better than their surface-dwelling kin. In the 1300s DR, it is said that the slaves vastly outnumbered the rest of Thay's population. In the current 5th edition D&D time period, the 1490s DR, it's a little different. During the Spell Plague, magic was undone and became unpredictable. Many spellcasters, including many Red Wizards, found their minds broken, and many died as their spells failed or turned against them. This disruption to the ruling class broke Thay's power structure. During this time, many scores were settled. Nobles knew that each dead Red Wizard was one less spy for Zaz-Tam and allowed them to make their own decisions. Non-nobles found this a great time to get revenge on any Red Wizard who slighted them. Many were killed and had their homes destroyed. As you can imagine, having an abundance of living slaves with resentment for their masters would lead to a problem. Eventually, the Spell Plague passed and Thay returned to being ruled by a powerful ruling class of spellcasters, but they became cautious of keeping too many living slaves. This event was called the Lore, which translates to big change, life change, or new direction in life, in the Thayan tongue. Now, most slaves in Thay are undead. They have no free will, obey all commands, they don't sleep, get tired, or get sick. If they die, you can simply reanimate them, instead of going to the slave markets and spending 50 gold pieces to purchase another. Undead also allow for more creative problem-solving methods, such as commanding hordes of them to walk to the bottom of a river, constantly piling up on top of each other until you have a flesh bridge that you can use to transport supplies over. Now, why didn't they make this transition to undead slavery earlier? Well, according to Spellbound, campaign guide page 7, it says that, quote, undead slaves often prove clumsy and unreliable, end quote. I guess in the last century, necromancy spells have gotten more precise in their controlling capabilities, because now most slaves in Thay are undead. I imagine most of these simple manual labor, such as farming, mining, loading, or moving heavy equipment around, would all be done by undead. The living slaves would mainly be domestic, acting as personal servants such as maids, cooks, sex slaves, etc. Having living slaves is less of a necessity and more of a status symbol thing nowadays. Now let's discuss the government of Thay. Now, I already talked quite a bit on the government of Thay in my video on Red Wizards, since Red Wizards are the ruling class and make up a good chunk of the government, but I want to talk about some things that I didn't cover in that video. As you know, High Regent Zaz-Tam is at the top. He is the dictator who has complete control. Underneath him are the 8 Zolkirs. I want to talk a little bit about the state of Zolkirs in the current time period, because I didn't talk about it in my last video. Earlier, when discussing slavery, I talked about the Lore, Thayan change. The Lore was everywhere in Thay, and brought a lot of change besides just the opinions on slavery. Zaz-Tam realized that the obedient undead he had installed as Zolkirs lacked ambition, drive, imagination, and attentiveness to human nature. They overlooked many details and schemes and had become an echo chamber of yes men. This was terrible for the future of Thay. He decided to rely more on living Zulkirs, ones with their own differing opinions on how Thay should operate. People who would challenge Zaztam's methods and offer counter-arguments. This would allow Thay to grow and prosper. This would lead to treachery, of course. They would think they could rule Thay better than him and plot to overthrow him, but Zaztam figured he could deal with this and that the risk was worth it for the future of Thay. Quote, "He tolerates their plots until they cross the line and directly threaten him or the well-being of Thay as a whole." End quote. He prefers to exile these traitors under pain of magical torment should they ever return, instead of outright killing them. He knows that cut off from their resources and support, they will have many challenges in the world, and that if, quote, "they return empowered and emboldened, then perhaps it is truly the will of Mystra that they should do so," end quote. Now, Zaztam still has a couple undead Zulkirs that are magically dominated by him, so that they cannot refuse to do Zaztam's bidding. Hlarkus, the Zulkir of Illusion, is so under his control that he can even be treated as a familiar by Zaztam if he wills it. Underneath the Zulkirs, you have the Tharshians. Thay is divided into 11 Tharches, which are essentially states or territories in modern day, just the wacky Thayan name for it. These Tharches are each ruled by a Tharshian if they are male or a Tharshianess if they are female, essentially the same as modern day governors. These are appointed by the Zulkirs and thus are beholden to them, quote, "making Thay a patchwork of competing political factions, cabals, conspiracies, and secret societies," end quote. This is one of the reasons Thay's government is so chaotic, filled with betrayals and power grabs that makes it hard for Thay's plans of expansion and conquest to be successful. The Tharshians hold complete power over their Tharch. Their word is law. This can of course be overruled by a Zulkir or a Zaztam, but no one else. Autharshes. Autharshes are chosen by the Tharshians and act as local bureaucrats overseeing various locations and projects for them. They are the equivalent of a mayor governing a city, but the title can also be given as a military title to a lord commander of a standing garrison. Autharshes are often replaced quickly. Those that are incompetent are removed swiftly, and those that are successful will be promoted to Tharshian once there is an opening, but the Tharshians tend to arrange the downfall of ambitious Autharshes to ensure they keep their jobs. Autharshes usually become scapegoats when something goes wrong for a Tharshian. A Khazarch is the leader of a trade enclave. They are technically equal in rank to an Autharsh, but usually are respected more since only red wizards can become a Khazarch. Those are the main high-ranking government positions and the sort of chain of command that they follow. Obviously, there's going to be tons and tons of other, like, small bureaucratic government jobs, but they don't really get fleshed out or detailed. The only other titles I know of are seneschals, which act as tax collectors and other administrative functions, and chancellors, which are just the representatives for an embassy. But normally, these embassies aren't located in other countries. They're actually embassies between the Tharshes of Thay. Laws. As I mentioned in my previous video, the government of Thay is very chaotic. It follows a might makes right attitude, and thus there are very few written laws, at least ones people actually follow. The laws of Thay are simple and the penalties are brutal. They are mostly concerned with establishing who's in power. The only laws that have been officially stated are from Unapproachable East, and thus are from the late 1300s DR. They are as follows. Anyone traveling within Thay must have a pass issued by a Tharshian giving permission to use specific roads and visit specific cities. Only red wizards may wear red robes, so that all shall be able to identify them instantly. Do not steal from other Thayans or harm their belongings, especially their slaves. Do not kill or harm another Thayan. In practice, this means do not kill or harm anyone from your class or above. And the last law is obey the orders of your betters. If you want more insight and detail on how the government operates, check out the video I did on red wizards. Military. In the 1300s DR, Thay's military was known as being rather chaotic and rarely used effectively. Each Zulkir and Tharshian is expected to raise their own legions, and even ordinary red wizards are allowed to maintain bodyguards, which could number in the thousands. If you watch my previous video, you'll understand how chaotic their government is, and these armies are each led by a different Zulkir or Tharshian, who aren't known for working well together. As far as I can tell, there was no unified, organized military that spanned the whole country. It was more of that each Zulkir and each Tharshian had their own private army, and they were just expected to work together, which, of course, rarely worked. The chaotic nature of their recruitment means few armies were the same. Their infantry legions can range from 800 to 2,000 troops, from goblins wearing loincloths to elite heavily armored knights. Their cavalry have tried riding everything from horses to manticores to giant cats to evil unicorns, and the races that serve are goblin slaves, orc mercenaries and orc slaves, and miscellaneous monsters such as ogres, hill giants, and trolls. The most common race in their military are humans, but the second most common are gnolls. Circles of red wizards serve in every military engagement. In addition to the various races mentioned, Thay's military is also made up of hordes upon hordes of undead. The only thing most people know about the Thayan military is their legions of undead. Most are mindless zombies swarming the battlefields like ants. Zaztam does have more elite undead soldiers called Dread Warriors. These were capable of speech and thinking for themselves, but still were fairly simple-minded, and complex orders would confuse them. Undead militaries are useful since they have no need for food, water, air, or sleep, and can be used in a variety of creative ways living people can't. However, their inability to think tactically and reason are huge drawbacks. Because of this, Thay still utilizes a regular military composed of living people. In the late 1400s DR, this would be the Thayan Knights, the Water Fist, and the Probity Corps. Earlier, I said Thay's military was very chaotic and underutilized because every Zulkir and Tharshian had their own personal army. Well, since Zaztam took over as dictator, he seems to have brought some much-needed order to their military, because these three factions seem to be somewhat organized and functional. So, at least in Thay's case, there are some benefits to being controlled by a single tyrant. So first, let's talk about the Thayan Knights. Other than undead, the Thayan army consists of Thayan Knights, highly trained and unfailingly loyal soldiers. They usually serve as bodyguards or escorts to red wizards, castle or fortress guards, or as commanders for undead armies in the field. Most Thayan Knights act as gate guards, harbor sentries, road patrols, wilderness wardens, and the rank-and-file officers in the army itself, but some are assigned or appropriated by a red wizard. When this happens, their sole duty is to protect that red wizard, and they are fanatically loyal to them and their country. The Water Fist. This is the Navy of Thay. Their official title is the Wave Serpents, but they are colloquially known by everyone as the Water Fist because of a famous line from a speech Zaztam gave. Quote, "Thay has 3 fists, one in armor, one on the water, and one unseen until it's too late," end quote. The Thayan Navy sails out of a base on the island Tharsh of Aleor, and because of this, the Navy usually falls under the authority of the Tharshian of Aleor. However, now that Thay is a dictatorship, while the Tharshian still oversees it, it is under the complete control of Zaztam. The ships are crewed by undead rowers, but the rest of the positions are filled by living sailors. Since the Sea of Fallen Stars is a fairly calm sea, their navy consists of sleek and maneuverable schooners and clippers as opposed to the wide galleys and cogs you'd find on the Sword Coast. The Probity Corps. The Probity Corps are the secret police of Thay. They are immune to any and all social or political barriers, reporting directly to Zaztam. They are feared by everyone within Thay, because anyone around you could be an agent of the Probity Corps. And even if you are a noble or a red wizard, you are not immune. Everyone knows or at least has heard of someone being disappeared by the Probity Corps. They don't have any official ranks, but the base title of any member is Inquisitor. Each Tharsh has a commanding Inquisitor called the Inquisitor Superior, who is personally selected by Zaztam. And then the soldiers employed by the Probity Corps are referred to simply as troopers. Religion. Religion is secondary to magic in Thay, but most red wizards at least pay lip service to a deity, since denying the power of gods is not really a smart move most of the time. That being said, most red wizards don't really worship them. Their words and prayers are hollow, and they really just focus on magic. They don't care about the gods. They don't really see them as supreme beings worthy of worship. They just see them as another thing that's powerful that they wish they could be. When you live in a world where a lot of the gods used to be humans that merely ascended to godhood because of their own ambitions, it makes the concept of a god not seem as impressive. And it also means that, theoretically, a red wizard could become one. Many evil gods and goddesses are openly worshipped in Thay, such as Bane, Bashaba, Loviatar, Shar, Malar, Talana, Umberlee, etc. Veneration of good gods is usually discouraged but not outlawed, and even a lawful good deity can be useful in certain situations. As of the late 1300s DR, Kossith, the Lord of Flame, is the most widespread and popular faith in Thay, ever since his avatar aided Thay in the Salamander War. It is not uncommon for Thayan humans to adopt other races' gods, such as Lolth, Jublex, and Vaprak. Non-humans continue to worship their pantheons. Many believe red wizards to worship demons and devils, but this isn't true. They do summon and make deals with them, though. Economy. Most of Thay's commerce is centered on trade. They control the flow of goods between the eastern and western lands, and they have Thayan trade enclaves exerting significant influence in important ports around the world. Thay is the #1 exporter of magic items, and they tend to sell for much cheaper than any others. In fact, most of what Thay sells, they sell for cheap, and it's all part of their plan for world domination. Many people who buy Thayan goods understand the evil history of its country, but do business with them anyway because their prices are too good to turn down. Thayan merchants can then work their way into every major economy of Faerun, and from there, learn enough about the locals to dismantle them quietly from within. They export large quantities of excess crops, such as grain, mainly wheat, oats, and barley, fruit, mainly tomatoes, figs, apples, pears, citrons, and oranges, and corn. The magic of the Red Wizards controls their weather and keeps it favorable even in times of drought in surrounding lands. Because of this, many nearby nations, including Thesk and Jacinta, are dependent on Thayan crops to keep their own people fed. In addition to raw foodstuffs, other Thayan exports are timber, including their famous blackwood tree, metals, their silver and gold have brilliant hues and levels of purity, and artwork, jewelry, and other consumer goods created by skilled artisans, usually slaves. Oh, and goats. Thay is known throughout the entire world as having the most luxurious goats. Some have amazingly thick fur, some have really sweet, rich milk, and others just have really good tasting meat. Point is, Thayan goats are cracked. Thay was able to become this wealthy because of its abundance of free slave labor. They rely less on slaves now than they used to, but I imagine many of their skilled crafts and art they export are still made by living slaves. That and the more simple and menial labor jobs such as farming and mining are probably a predominantly undead workforce. Thay's main import are slaves. However, with the recent Lore making Thayans realize living slaves aren't worth the trouble, and with the younger generation wanting to prove Thay's value through direct action rather than on the backs of slaves, bringing new slaves into the country has become less acceptable. The Thayan View. All Thayans seek more power in society and more personal wealth. They also work toward perfecting their skills and hobbies that bring them personal fulfillment. Those with aptitude for magic can become red wizards, but those without it see no reward for them in Thay. Sure, they could maybe become a wealthy merchant or hold local political power, but this usually fails to satiate the lust for power most Thayans possess. Compassion is for weaker humans. Thayans believe they should be strong of will and clear of purpose, and seize what can be theirs. They resent the authoritarian and corrupt rule the Red Wizards have over them, but also believe that they are necessary to keep their neighboring countries from conquering them. Thayans believe every other nation in the world is its foe. They believe their country is the most powerful and advanced in the world, and that the other nations are jealous of this and wish to conquer them. They hate and fear magically powerful countries, especially the ones that share their border, Rashaman and Aglarond. In reality, Aglarond and Rashaman don't give a shit about conquering Thay, they just want to be left alone. If you look at history, it's always Thay invading them and not the other way around, but the Thayans don't see it that way. Now let's discuss Thayan culture. First, let's talk about their fashion. Many Thayans have tattoos whose patterns reflect goals and accomplishments. Red Wizards have these too, oftentimes magical ones, but these are far more detailed and intricate than the ones non-Red Wizards would dare to get without truthfully earning them. Most Mulani have these, and then a decent amount of Rashami also have these. Mulani are expected to keep their hair closely shaved, and many Rashami shave their heads too to emulate this. It is illegal for slaves to cut their hair at all to help differentiate them. It is also illegal for any non-Red Wizard to wear red robes, and any Red Wizard who discovers the deceit has the authority to kill them on the spot. Because of this severe punishment, Thayans refuse to dress in any clothes of that color just in case. Other than refusing to wear red robes, I can't find much information on the clothes that Thayans wear. Spellbound says Rashami and Thay dress simply. Baggy trousers, tunics, or socks, and more than 1 or 2 pieces of jewelry is uncommon among the lower class. Wealthier Rashami will wear robes and cloaks rich in color. That's pretty vague and doesn't really paint a good picture of what their clothes look like. Also, that's only about Rashami clothing. I can't find anything about what the Mulani wear. Now, Thay, Land of the Red Wizards, has a section titled Fashion, but it only talks about their underwear. That's more of a practical decision and not a decision based around fashion or looks. So I'm not really sure what's going on there, but I have a feeling there might have been more written that was cut. So in terms of text and official lore on the matter, there's not much, but the artwork featured in the book Thay, Land of the Red Wizards does have plenty of non-red wizards in their native clothes, so that can give you a pretty good idea of what they wear. Their jewelry seems to be fairly simple geometric shapes made out of gold. It reminds me of indigenous South American civilizations, stuff you'd find in Road to El Dorado or Emperor's New Groove. Their clothing and architecture is more unique though. Also keep in mind the Forgotten Realms, or at least the parts created by Ed Greenwood, are not supposed to have any real world analogs, so I wouldn't focus too much on trying to relate their culture to a real world one, even though I literally just did. Cuisine. Thayan cuisine makes abundant use of diced olives, leeks, lemons and lemon juice, and thainin, which is a tall grass that grows everywhere in Thay. Onions, barley, and fava beans, although Thayans call them cuth, make frequent appearances as well. Honey is the usual sweetener, and the spices they tend to use are garlic, nutmeg, and cloves. Grain, mainly barley and rye, is plentiful, but rice is not. They do have wild rice in southern Thayan dishes, and northern Thay uses persimmon, morin, which is what they call rhubarb, and arath, which is what they call celery. Most Thayan bread is flatbread. Average Thayan snacks are nuts or nutty flavored balls of cheese. The most memorable dishes to Outlanders are the ones dominated by tamarind sauces. Thayans call this rarthaik. Every Thayan has their own and unique family recipes for rarthaik. Homes. Wealthy red wizards will normally have a mansion residence in Eltabar along with a home in their native Tharch. Many red wizards that want a more private residence, not in a major city but out in the country, will have walled compounds filled with guards. The inner compound will have the red wizard's mansion, a small but nice guest house to impress their guests, with spies and hidden passageways in the walls using spy holes, and then a servant's quarters between the guest house and mansion, so that if the guests were to attack the mansion, the wizard would be warned by the screaming of servants. They would also have a spellcasting chamber to practice spells and perfect new ones. It's basically a warehouse surrounded by rings of raised earthen walls in order to absorb errant spells. For security reasons, red wizards never kept slaves here, or at least they were not served by them in the inner compound, and instead hired middle-class servants for these compounds. In average Thayan homes, it is common to crush mint or burn incense in order to fend off unpleasant smells. They tend to furnish their homes with lots of couches that had many pillows and fringed blankets, waist-high stone pedestals, called vorsal for plural or vorse for singular, by the couches or against the walls to hold snacks or candles, and their chairs tended to be high-backed and had oval or star-shaped side tables next to them. When groups would dine, they usually just would each have their own side table next to their chair instead of one large dining table. Ceilings are stucco, painted with designs or scenes of ancestral achievements. They would have treadle-powered ceiling fans, and their floors would be tiled, but in poorer homes would be smooth, compacted earth painted or covered with pebble mosaics. It is common for Thayans to decorate their homes with statues of serpents. You see, deep inside Thaymount is a cavern layer constructed by the Ba'ateeth, an organization of Saruk, Batraki, and Aerie, 3 of the 5 creator races that dominated Toril 35,000 years ago. The Ba'ateeth were responsible for creating the Nether Scrolls. They created this cavern layer, which they called Asakath, to house the Athora. The Athora is a giant rock that emanates powerful magic, imbuing the mountain and plateau around it with magic. As discussed in my last video, not anyone can become a wizard in the Forgotten Realms. You must be born with the gift. If you've ever wondered how there are enough spellcasters in Thay to create an entire ruling class out of them, it's because of this. The Athora makes Thay a magically powerful land, and so there is a much higher percentage of people born with the gift here when compared to the rest of Toril. Within Asakath, there are many statues enchanted with defensive magics to prevent those unauthorized from entering. Many of these statues are stylized Saruk, the Saruk being a race of reptilian creatures, and the creators of many of the reptilian races we know today, such as the Wanti, Naga, and Lizard folk. Because of this, Thayans associate magical power with the presence of these serpentine statues, and over time, they have come to represent what is best of Thay, and they are thought to bring good luck. Music. Thay's music has a very national war march style to it. It consists of a drum beat providing a cadence for marching, and then added to by war horns blaring martial-sounding fanfares. In private homes, taverns, and clubs of the middle and lower class, a more wanton style is danced to. Quote, drum-heavy tunes in which a lone female singer vocalizes above a deep drum beat, end quote, usually consisting of repeated musical phrases which sound almost like questions or challenges. These were called Thayraiden, which meant life laments in Thayan. Other instruments commonly found in the Thayraiden were yartines, a stringed instrument similar to a guitar, piping glaurs, curved valved horns that sound like trumpets, and orthuns, a floor-standing bass sham. Red wizards prefer to listen to exotic music they picked up from their travels around Faerun, using a combination of record and playback spells and enslaved musicians to privately enjoy music, which many use for meditation, spell memorization, and relaxation. That is the Society of Thay. That is what living within its borders is like. There are other things about the government and social structure I didn't mention because I already discussed it in my previous video on the Red Wizards, so you should check that out if you haven't already. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. Remember to subscribe to my channel for more D&D related content.